Nobody at Dixon City Hall noticed that $54 million was being funneled out of the town's bank accounts over the course of 20 years. It was the biggest case of municipal embezzlement in US history. With a population of just 16,000 people, Dixon is quintessential small town USA. The downtown area is old-fashioned, flags are displayed on front porches, and the town's claim to fame and main tourist attraction is the childhood home of former President Ronald Reagan. The town's system of governance was also very old-fashioned. The council consisted of a mayor and 4 commissioners who oversaw their various departments. All of these people only worked at City Hall part-time and usually held full-time jobs elsewhere. For instance, Mayor Jim Burke owned his own real estate firm, and Finance Commissioner Roy Bridgman was the business teacher and athletics coach at the local high school. Although some of these commissioners weren't always the most qualified for their roles, it suited the small town where everyone knew each other. The fact that the local government leaders were just ordinary citizens fostered a trusting and easygoing environment around City Hall, and the town's residents felt truly represented. That is until someone saw an opportunity to exploit the trust the community had in them and use it for personal gain, in the form of jewellery, cars, and show horses. It's 1971. Rita Humphrey was fresh out of high school, about to start her first day as a secretary at Dixon City Hall. She had considered going to college, but after impressing Dixon's comptroller during her internship, she was offered a full-time job and decided to take it. She decided the job was the best way to earn money so she could fund her true passion, quarter horses. Rita grew up in Dixon on her family's farm with her 5 siblings. Her mother's hobby was showing quarter horses competitively, and Rita grew to share the same hobby. Quarter horses are the most popular breed of horses in the United States. They are loved for their athleticism and looks and are also good workhorses. A quarter horse can cost anywhere from a few $1,000s to $250,000. The best quarter horses can compete in shows where they are judged for their appearance and agility. Stable rental, training, grooming, food, and vet bills make showing quarter horses a very expensive hobby. But Rita had inherited her mother's competitiveness and was determined to succeed in showing prize quarter horses. In 1974, Rita met engineer Rita Crundwell. They got married the same year but never had kids. In 1983, the Dixon City comptroller retired, and Rita was promoted to the role. She was smart, hardworking, and got along with everyone. It was the obvious choice. A comptroller is similar to a treasurer. Rita's job was to control all the money coming in and out of the town and dictate the budget. She was trusted to manage every accounting issue in City Hall, no matter how big or small. In 1984, Rita's mother died, and 2 years later, she divorced Jerry, citing, quote, extreme and repeated mental cruelty. Although her personal life was in shambles, she flourished at work. She knew the ins and outs of how the town operated and had full control over pretty much everything to do with Dixon's money. By now, she had saved up enough to buy her first horse and was able to start competing. In 1985, Rita won her first state title in Indiana and then won a national title in Texas. She had finally gotten a taste of victory, and these 2 wins fueled her desire for more trophies. She had her sights set on the biggest prize at these horse shows, the Leading Owner Award, but she would need many more horses before she could achieve this goal. In 1990, Rita opened up a new bank account under Dixon City's name, the Reserve Sewer Capital Development Account in the care of Rita Crundwell. She strategically picked an official-sounding but also mundane name for the account, and nobody at City Hall or the bank batted an eyelid. I'm sure you can see where this is going. In 1991, she funneled $181,000 out of Dixon City's bank account into her personal account. That same year, Rita began investing in more horses and also treated herself to some $3,000 diamond earrings and a $19,000 pontoon boat with a wet bar and barbecue on board. Over the next few years, Rita's star began to rise in the competitive quarter horse world. Her herd would eventually grow from a few horses to a few hundred horses. She would give them names like I'm Money Too, She Scores, Packin' Jewels, Careful Who You Invite, and I Found a Penny. Her purchases were getting more and more extravagant. Diamond jewelry, custom furniture sets, custom saddles, a golf cart, motorhome, second boat, and pickup trucks. She spent $500,000 renovating her home, added an in-ground pool, and doubled the square footage. Back at her comptroller office, she cut the town's fire department budget by $26,000 and eliminated the $46,000 assistant fire chief position. By the mid-90s, Rita had become a celebrity in the horse world, not only for winning prizes all over the country, but also for her showiness. She was always dripping in diamonds and wore custom-made sequined, beaded jackets, sometimes changing into several different outfits per show. She traveled in style with her luxury motorhome and horse trailers emblazoned with her initials. In 2004, Rita won the top prize of leading owner at the American Quarter Horse Association's annual championship in Oklahoma City. Her dream had finally come true. Rita would go on to win this highly coveted prize 7 more times. By the late 2000s, Rita was the undisputed queen of quarter horses. In 2006, Rita bought an 88-acre piece of land and turned it into Rita's Ranch, a state-of-the-art horse breeding and training facility, complete with a 20,000 square foot barn, an arena, stalls, and offices. She also started to keep horses at stables run by her boyfriend, Jim McKillips, who was also heavily involved in the competitive quarter horse scene. She upgraded her motorhome to a $2.1 million 45-foot luxury coach with marble counters, a king-size bed, and 5 TVs. Most competitors would bring 2 or 3 horses to each show, but Rita had a custom painted trailer that could transport 10 horses. Many competitors would set up a small stand to showcase their products and awards, but Rita and her entourage set up a replica log cabin as an entrance to her personal exhibit, where she displayed her many, many trophies. Out the front of her stand was a fully stocked bar and a bartender serving free cocktails. However, back in Dixon, Rita would keep a low profile. She showed up to work in modest office attire and never wore her expensive jewelry. People knew she was well off, as her huge house and hundreds of horses on her ranch were hard to miss. But most Dixon residents assumed she was making substantial money from selling horses and stud fees, as well as earning prize money at quarter horse shows. Rumors also flew around town about an inheritance from a mega-rich dead ex-boyfriend, or that maybe she had played the stock market well. At the end of the day, nobody wanted to pry. It was impolite, and plus, Rita threw really fun pool parties at her house. By the end of 2006, Rita had stolen $26 million from Dixon City. Meanwhile, the town was suffering financially. Improvements to traffic infrastructure were cancelled, the building of wheelchair ramps was abandoned, and emergency service vehicles were not able to be upgraded. The town's footpaths were crumbling, potholes made some roads nearly unusable, and a huge sinkhole opened up as a result of neglected pipe maintenance. In April 2009, a particularly bleak budget meeting was underway in Dixon City Hall. The town was over $1 million in debt. Roy Bridgman, the finance commissioner and Rita's former high school teacher, delivered the news that there would inevitably be layoffs and cuts to city services. Rita blamed the deficit on the economic downturn and the state of Illinois' delays in making payments. Cuts were made from every department, including $40,000 from the town's emergency vehicle fund. In September that same year, Rita purchased a $200,000 home in Florida, renovated it, and ordered custom furniture, bought a horse trailer for $250,000, a $30,000 Ford Thunderbird, a $57,000 Chevy Silverado pickup truck, and a $225,000 horse that she named the Zazzy Lady. By day, she was the mild-mannered small-town comptroller, and by night, she was living it up, throwing lavish parties in Florida, dressed in bedazzled outfits that cost thousands of dollars. The global financial crisis had provided a convenient excuse as to why Dixon City was struggling to find money, and Rita ended up embezzling almost $6 million in 2008 and then another $5 million in 2009. During Rita's tenure as comptroller, 5 city councils, 3 mayors, and 3 financial commissioners came and went. She was extremely diligent with her comptroller work and would deliberately cook the numbers in such a convoluted way that no one else could really make any sense of it. She made herself the only one who truly understood the town's finances and, as a result, indispensable to Dixon City Hall. By the time she was caught, Rita had stolen almost $54 million from the town over the course of 20 years, averaging out to about $3,300 per Dixon resident. It's now 2011. Kathy Swanson, the city clerk of Dixon, was looking for some bank statements to create reports. Kathy had been at City Hall since 1991 and worked closely with Rita Crundwell for the last 20 years. In recent years, Rita had been taking quite a lot of time off work to attend her horse shows, and she would have Kathy cover for her. In 2011, Rita had taken an additional 12 weeks of leave on top of her 4 weeks of annual leave. But it wasn't an issue, as Rita took the time off without pay and also traveled with her laptop, so she was always on call. On this particular day, Rita was out of town at a horse show, and Kathy was unusually busy. During the time Kathy had worked at City Hall, there were 2 things Rita was adamant about. No one was to open her mail, and any questions about bank accounts were to be directed to her. However, Kathy didn't have time to wait for Rita to get back to her about the bank statements, so she decided to call the bank herself and request all the statements. As she examined the statements, she was surprised to see an account she had never heard of before. It was the Reserve Sewer Capital Development account in the care of Rita Crundwell. Kathy's eyes widened in shock as she saw large deposits of hundreds of thousands of dollars going into Rita's personal bank account. Kathy didn't know what to do. She wanted to give Rita, her colleague and friend of 20 years, the benefit of the doubt, so she hid the statement in her car for 3 days before she eventually told Mayor Jim Burke. Jim had also known Rita since she was a child. His real estate business used to sponsor her baseball team. At first glance, the mayor guessed that Rita was using the secret bank account to hide the money she made from her horse business from the tax office. But when he saw that she had funneled almost $1 million into her personal account that month alone, he had no choice but to alert the FBI. The FBI instructed Kathy Swanson and Jim Burke to keep quiet so they could investigate and put together an airtight case. For 6 months, Kathy and Jim had to pretend that everything was normal and made friendly small talk with Rita, all while knowing the truth. Kathy would come into work early to secretly make copies of various documents requested by the FBI. Rita was extremely organized and a meticulous record keeper, so Kathy had to be very careful about putting documents back exactly where she had found them. On the morning of April 17, 2012, Jim pulled Kathy aside to let her know that today would be the last day they had to keep their secret. He called Rita into his office under the pretense of having a question about some day-to-day matter. When Rita stepped inside the office, 3 FBI agents were waiting for her. Lead agent Patrick Gary displayed his badge and said, "We'd like to ask you some questions." At first, Rita maintained a calm demeanor and a smile, but when she was confronted with a question about the stolen money, she dropped the act and came clean. 15 more federal agents entered City Hall to seize evidence. Rita was questioned for an hour and a half inside the mayor's office. She cooperated and confessed to stealing just $10 million. She was arrested and taken to Rockford Police Station about an hour away, where she decided to plead not guilty. The search operation spanned across Rita's multiple properties in Dixon and Florida, as well as 22 farms over 13 states where she kept her 400 horses. Hidden in the basement crawl space of her main home in Dixon, investigators discovered boxes of records of every single illegal transaction Rita had ever made. She had always been a meticulous record keeper, and now it would be her undoing. So how did Rita pull all this off? Her scheme was surprisingly simple. She would first transfer money out of the Illinois Fund, an investment account open to all Illinois municipalities. Towns deposit their income from taxes, fees, federal grants, etc. into this fund to earn interest while they wait to spend it. Rita would then make withdrawals from the Illinois fund and deposit money into the 6 legitimate Dixon City accounts. So far, nothing unusual. After moving money around the city's accounts, she would then create fake invoices for non-existent projects and write out the checks to pay for them, depositing the money into her secret sewer account. She would then transfer money from her secret account into her personal bank account. She did this process 179 times. She got away with it for 20 years because she knew nobody else at City Hall understood how the finances worked as well as her, and nobody would ever try to track the money. Her boss, Roy Bridgman, the finance commissioner who had known Rita since she was a child, worked part-time on a low wage and never suspected that Rita was up to anything shady. Government accounting regulations and reporting requirements were also much more relaxed in the 80s and 90s. Investigators noted that Rita's time off work was unusual and pointed out an arrogance that she developed over the years. Usually, fraudsters and embezzlers want to be as present as possible in order to control the situation and avoid detection. But in 2011 alone, Rita took 16 weeks off to compete in her horse shows, leaving her money trail at the office where anyone could find it if they looked hard enough. That was how much she knew everyone trusted her. Then there were the auditors. Clifton Gunderson, now Clifton Larson Allen, was under a retainer with Dixon City. Clifton's services were sought out nearly every day by the city for opinions and reviews of their financial matters. Yet no auditor had ever realized that Rita Crundwell had created 179 fake invoices. Some of them even had spelling mistakes and were missing information typically found on an invoice. Dixon City sued Clifton, alleging that the auditors should have detected the fraud. In the deposition, Clifton admitted that they knew about the sewer account but never investigated it. It then came out that 2 senior auditors from the Clifton-Dixon office both also worked on Rita's personal and business taxes for many years, meaning the auditors were aware of both Dixon City's budget deficit as well as Rita Crundwell's exorbitant spending habit. Rita was so close with the auditors that she even played on Clifton-Dixon's softball team. Did the auditors simply fail to connect the dots, or was there something more going on? The lawsuit never went to trial. Dixon City settled with Clifton for $35 million, and Fifth Third Bank, where Rita had opened her secret account, for nearly $4 million. September 2012. It was 5 months after Rita's arrest. News had spread quickly around the town about Rita's multi-million-dollar embezzlement scheme, and Dixon residents were shocked and understandably furious. Rita had been released on a bond of just $4,500, as she was not deemed to be a flight risk. Plus, she was cooperating with the investigation. US Marshals were liquidating Rita's assets and auctioning off her 5 properties, 400 horses, dozens of cowboy hats, $250,000 worth of jewelry, and dozens of cars. 2,000 equestrian enthusiasts and curious Dixon residents descended upon Rita's ranch to get themselves discounts on horse products or to see where their tax dollars had gone over the years. Even those who had been in the quarter horse scene their whole lives were awestruck by Rita's herd of horses and the sheer amount of stuff she owned. Usually the government would wait for a guilty plea or conviction before auctioning off assets, but in this case, living, breathing, expensive animals were involved. They would recoup as much money as they could, and if they could prove Rita was guilty, then the money would be returned to Dixon. The first horse to be auctioned off was Rita's prize championship horse, Good I Will Be, which fetched $750,000. 95 tubes of his frozen semen were then auctioned off for a total of $98,500. Most of Rita's other horses were auctioned off for far less than what she had paid for them, and her other valuable belongings were all sold at discount prices. The auction brought in a total of $10 million. In November 2012, Rita, facing overwhelming evidence, changed her mind and pleaded guilty to wire fraud and money laundering. She was sentenced to 19 years and 7 months in federal prison, just shy of the 20-year maximum. She was also ordered to pay a restitution of almost $54 million and an additional forfeiture of the same amount. At her sentencing hearing, Rita apologized to her friends and family, but never expressed remorse for stealing from the residents of her hometown. Many wondered if Rita did this all single-handedly or if anyone else was in on it, but the FBI were never able to prove that anyone else was involved in the scheme. After details of Rita's embezzlement came out, Dixon residents became enraged with the city council, accusing them of not performing their duties properly. Mayor Jim Burke especially received a lot of backlash, and many called for him to resign. Residents became even more incensed when it came out that the neighboring town Sterling, which had roughly the same population and budget as Dixon, had seen the red flags and alerted Jim Burke that something was not right with their finances. The citizens of Dixon voted in a new managerial form of governance, and a new mayor with 5 new council people were also elected. The comptroller position was dissolved entirely, and Paula Meyer, the new finance director, overhauled the department. She changed up her staff's duties and even physically moved people's desks around to prevent any sort of fraud. New procedures for making payments were also put into place to allow for more transparency. Dixon was able to recoup about $40 million from the sale of Rita's assets, as well as the lawsuit against the auditor and bank, and were able to start paying off their loans and revive infrastructure projects. Streets are now smooth, the public library was renovated, and underground pipes were replaced, all thanks to what locals call Rita money. When the pandemic hit in 2020, Rita petitioned for compassionate early release in a 9-page handwritten letter, citing her deteriorating health putting her at risk. She was denied, but in August 2021, Rita Crundwell filed an appeal and was released from prison, aged 68. She was taken to a halfway house in Chicago, where she will remain until October 2029. Rita served a total of just 8 years in prison, less than half the time she had been sentenced to.